Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here for the fourth and final installation of NLU Career Academy. I am delighted to have you all here and to have you hear our alumni panel presenters. We really want to make this an interactive experience for you guys. I want you to have the opportunity to take advantage of learning from people who have graduated from National Louis University. Each of these four people up here are graduates of this institution and have gone on to have very successful careers. So this is your big opportunity to take advantage of the chance to ask them questions and learn from their experience. I just want to say a special thank you to all of our alumni who are here tonight. It has just been an honor to get to know each of you a little bit better and to work with you a little bit better. And this is just the perfect expression of what our founder had in mind in terms of giving back and making a strong community. So you guys are really amazing and I really appreciate it. I also want to say a special thank you to our partners at Career Transition Center. Laura, you've been amazing to work with. I'm really enjoying it. And Jim, our moderator, you are all in very good hands tonight with this. And finally, a special note to our event planner, Carrie Smith. She should be knighted for sainthood. I think that's my cue. I'm just going to turn it over to Jim. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm the guy that's going to moderate this thing, and we're encouraging you to ask questions too. We've got an awful lot of questions here, and we don't really have a lot of time, but if there's something we're covering and it's not quite what you want, go ahead and ask the question. The only thing I ask is don't make it personal. Ask a general question. We can do one-on-one personal afterwards if you've got some kind of special issue. So we want to make it beneficial for everybody. But let me introduce our panel for you. Chair number one is Matthew King. Matt is the Executive Director and Principal of Epic Academy, which is a charter high school in Chicago. Prior to Epic, Matt was a teacher and administrator. Next is Amy Bastuge. Amy is currently the VP of HR at Radio Flyer, everybody's favorite Red Wagon. She has previous experience as an HR assignment at Felpro and Hendrickson. And then we have Marjorie Killeen. Marjorie is a writer and a speaker. Her specialties are interpersonal communications, relationship building, and marketing. Lastly, we have the person with the longest title of anyone I've ever met. Ursula is the governance and operations manager at the Association for Healthcare Volunteers, Resource Professionals for the AHA. Ursula is knowledgeable of the healthcare environment and healthcare workforce needs. Now I'd like to start with Matthew and ask him to just give us an idea of what part you play in the hiring process. Matt?
Sure. In terms of my role in the hiring process, we opened our school in 2009, and so we started from scratch. And so I've been involved in every personal decision from administrative secretarial staff to CFO to all of our teachers. I've had a role either directly or in advising every hire we've had in our building.
Hello. In my current role, I'm responsible for the entire selection process for our organization, which includes creating the process and training our managers on how to conduct interviews. And I'm also involved in the actual screening of candidates and the hiring decisions.
I don't hire people directly myself, but I do work with training university students and new hires in interpersonal skills, in developing effective communication skills that would certainly be helpful to the interview process and beyond.
So I do the hiring at my organization, so from the selection process to the interview process to the onboarding process, but I also support over 5,000 of our members to help them through transition when they're looking to make a career change, when they're making a transition into a totally different field like healthcare, as well as new people in the profession. How do I get my foot in the door and how do I make an impression with the hiring manager? So I kind of coach them through that either over the phone or virtually.
Don't keep the microphone.
Okay.
We don't want to waste any motion here.
All right.
Ursula, what's the first thing you look at when you look at a resume?
So we all have a resume, but we really need to make sure that that resume that you're submitting fits the job that you're applying for. You know, it's pretty easy to go through and review a job description that you're applying for, pull out those keywords, because the hiring manager really will not have time to go through 400 resumes to make sure and read the 5 pages that you're including for your resume. So the computer is going to do a lot of that work for them. So we really need to make sure that keywords in the job description really fit the resume. And you really need to make sure you kind of make it fresh and updated. You know, the objective, colon, to find a job, no one's reading those anymore. So really you need to make sure that you are summarizing your accomplishments and what you're going to be able to contribute to the organization. When I look at a resume, if something doesn't stand out right away in 30 seconds, we have to go on to the next resume. So really what's going to capture someone's attention with some keywords, matching that job description are really going to be the first things that we look for, as well as competencies. Everyone knows what the competencies are of a job description, so we don't need to see that you have expertise in Microsoft Office, Word, and Excel. That's a given. So it doesn't even make sense to put that on a resume. So if you have competencies in public speaking, team building, relationship building, those are the kind of things that hiring manager is going to be looking for, because those are the things that you'll be doing in that job that you're applying for within that job description. Sorry for the long answer.
Thank you. Marjorie, I guess we'll take a little bit different point of view and maybe tips you can give them on writing that resume. What kind of things would you encourage them to do?
Right. I am a graduate of the Master's in Written Communication program here at National Louis, and I would advise everyone, first of all, to have their resume triple proofread, because it is so important that you don't present a negative image of yourself on paper with grammatical errors or misspellings or redundancies. Also, I would say make your competencies as clear as possible. Don't try to use, complicated terminology to describe something that's very clear. So those would be my tips.
Amy?
Okay. I agree with both of the things that they said. One way to think about it would be, what if I was the recruiter? And what if I had 1,000 resumes to read? What information do I need as soon as possible to determine if there's a match? So not only reading the resume and changing, or reading the job description and changing your resume factually to align the way that you describe what you've done with the job description is going to make it easier for the recruiter. I don't mean make things up. I mean that there's a lot of ways to say that you handle customers on the phone. If the job isn't over the phone, then focus more on how you resolve customer issues. So it's very important to say, I'm the recruiter, I've got 60 seconds, and my recruiters go in like 30-second increments, 60 seconds, done, or, oh, I'm going to keep reading another 60 seconds, or another 30 seconds, another 30 seconds to determine if this resume is a match. The other thing in addition to competencies is, what have you achieved, or what results have you done? What do you have to show? So not only have you handled customers, what's the result? My customer service rating was 98%, or I had 90% first call resolution. So what was the actual result that you achieved? So that's what we're looking for, is also results in addition to this quick match right off the bat along the resumes. And if there's any typos, trying to be clever with your writing versus clear, that doesn't get through the filter, because the way that we look at it is that you have 1 hour to 10 years to write this resume, so we perceive this is your best work. So treat it like it's your best work, and know that that's how the recruiter's receiving it, that this is my best work, so you're going to want to put your best foot forward.
I would just concur with everything that was already said, and I would just echo the results-based. When we look at our resumes, we're looking for teachers that just didn't teach a lesson or teach a unit, but what were the results? How many of their students mastered the objectives? And so that's one of the things that we are really, really focused on is people that are focused on results and improvement and growth.
Thank you. Margie, what would you suggest people that have gaps in their resume? What kind of suggestions could you give them?
When I came to National Louis, I had been a stay-at-home mom for about 10 years, so I definitely had gaps in my resume. The best way I found to get back to work was, as a writer, was to write and to demonstrate that I was a writer. And now the internet allows you to show your competencies online. So if you aren't working in your chosen field yet, my advice would be to demonstrate your interest and your competencies in that field. So you fill in those gaps by showing employers that you're involved and interested and engaged in learning in the field.
Thank you. Amy, what would you suggest about gaps?
Be honest. In some ways, it doesn't get any simpler than that for me in our recruiting process, because our screening process, we ask so many questions. You're going to end up being honest in the end, and it's going to look like you weren't honest in the beginning. Everyone has a story, whether your story is about the job you're currently working in and how those skills translate to the job that you have, or the job you're not currently working in, but how are you demonstrating the skills, and tell me the story about how that translates into the work that we need you to do. Because at the end, we all have the same objective. We really want to hire someone to do the work that we need someone to do, because there's somebody that's working twice as hard because that job's open, just like the candidate coming to us says, I really want to work and do the work that you have available. So help paint the picture for us, but just be honest, because for us, integrity rules you out. It doesn't matter how good the story. If you weren't honest, then for us, integrity is a key value for us, so that would remove you from consideration.
Thank you. Ursula, how would you address that question?
I think you have the opportunity to tell a great story in your cover letter. That's kind of your part 2 of your resume. And share your story. Be positive. You know, if you're a stay-at-home mom, what were you doing? You were doing a ton of things. You were time management, financial planning. I mean, there's a way that you can kind of put a great spin on that. Don't get all caught up in, I haven't done anything in 2 years. You have been doing a lot of great things. It's just how you're going to put it down on paper to make sure that the recruiter, again, it catches their eye with how is that going to really translate into that job that you're applying for. And I'm sure you'll be able to make a good match. You guys really have a tremendous resource here with Emily, with Julie in the Career Services Department. And you really need to make sure that you go to them with that cover letter, with that resume, and really have them coach you through and give you ideas on how you can incorporate all those things. Helen also is a great resource for you, and they're here to help you with those things.
How about you, Matt?
Sure, I think there's probably 2 things worth mentioning, I think, to touch on the cover letter as well as touching on the resume. I think if you have gaps in your employment, you don't have a whole lot of experience in the area that you're looking for, I think you have to step back and really think about a strategy and how are you going to craft your resume so that it brings the best light and the things that are applicable skills to what you're applying for. I think you'd want to start with looking at some different position postings and their rundown of what they're looking for, the skills they're looking for, and then go back to your experiences and do some matching of those skills and trying to highlight those skills versus going back to saying, here's what I did, and then putting your resume out there. I often see a lot of resumes where they may be really talented people, but they didn't present themselves in a way where their resume was any way type of match for the skills that we posted and we were looking for the job. And so oftentimes people will not be in contention because of that and just the way they strategized or presented their resume. And the second thing is the cover letter, and we're a small organization. We have 60 employees, and so we do take the time to read the cover letter. At the same time, we're going to probably spend 30 seconds to 60 seconds looking at the cover letter. And I'll tell you one thing that automatically, we weed people out is if they didn't take time to personalize it and make the connection between our organization and the job, and then your skills. Often I see a lot of dear hiring manager and your organization. They don't take time to put our organization in. They don't take time to really go through and at least try and find one or two sentences that match why they're a good fit for the position and why the organization is a good fit. It seems like, pretty simple stuff. I'm sure you guys have been coached on it to no end, and you already do those things, but I can tell you that I probably only get 15% of cover letters that are actually personalized, connected to the job, or our organization or our mission even.
Interesting. So I'll keep that microphone for a minute. We'll talk a little bit about networking now. Man, how would you recommend someone to network into Epic Academy?
I think the best way to network into Epic Academy would be to go through someone that we know, and have them just shoot an email to me, letting me know that they're applying. We try to keep all of our resumes through our online portal, through the website, and so we don't take phone calls, we don't take cold calls, we don't take mailed resumes. Like, we just want a really specific way. And if you have that person on the inside that's working for you, often people will just come and they'll say, something once. I have someone who's really interested, here's their name, they'll write it down, maybe they'll send an email, and that'll give me a prompt to make sure I go through our system and look for it.
How about you, Amy?
We use LinkedIn a lot. It's a great way to network and connect with people. So I would say that that's the primary way. Who are you already connected with? And who could you connect with via LinkedIn to find out more information about the job so that you could self-assess if the job's a good match for you? In general, a lot of our positions, they require some level of functional expertise. So in our organization, there's a lot of us that go out and do events like this that aren't that hard to Google. If you Google Radio Flyer, you could find that our SVP of product development might be presenting at a product development conference. So if you're a product development engineer and you make an effort to either go to the place where he's presenting or then do some research to connect with someone that may have met him, then you're already showing that you're resourceful, you know how to do research, you know how to find connections. So this whole process with the internet gives you such access to information gathering that could put you in a better position to, how do I make either that personal connection or be able to write something in an email that shows that I've taken time when you're asking someone to connect with you via LinkedIn.
I'll ask Ursula that question now.
All right. So when you look at LinkedIn, you have your profile, absolutely. But there's probably literally about 1 million LinkedIn groups that you should be able to explore. And from that million, maybe 100,000 right here in Chicago. So again, just kind of go into the field that you're interested in, do some research, and just start selecting these groups so that virtually you can start networking with these folks, contribute through discussions, see what type of events are being held, just like Amy said, and start attending these events. Many, if not all, are free. It just takes your time. So go to these events, start networking with these people, network with people that are here tonight. What are you here for? What are your interests? Where do you work? We spent 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes, we now know that the four of us truly have a connection based on the people that we work with, people that we network with. You never know who's going to come across as your next employer or the next person that's going to be working for you. So it's really important that you start networking virtually as quickly as you can, because once you do get in the workplace, that's really how everybody networks. A lot of the face-to-face phone calls, people just don't have time for that. So people work all night on the weekends, so doing everything virtually really makes sense for them.
Thank you.
I would just like to point out that when you are networking, your goal is to create a reciprocal relationship. Networking isn't just to find someone who can do something for you. So it's an ongoing relationship, so being part of an organization, real, virtual, or in face-to-face, remember that you should show up with something to contribute yourself, even if it's your attention or participation.
Thank you. Amy, can you please explain the screening process you use to determine who will be selected to be actually interviewed for an opening?
Okay. We have a really detailed screening process at our organization, and we invest a lot of time and resources into it. And the reason is that we're not a very large organization, and so finding the right skill sets and the right match for our culture are really important. We use LinkedIn a lot for our recruiting, a lot of the functional areas. It's an effective tool for us. On occasion, we use recruiters. Our best source is referrals. So we rely on the networks of people who can say, I've worked with this person, or I know of their work. So when we're going through a process to determine who we actually interview, it comes down to who is the most qualified or best match for the job description that we have. Because before you actually interview with someone to go through how do their behaviors match the behaviors that you need in your culture and for the job to be successful, it's a piece of paper that is a job description matching process. So the first thing that we're looking for is the work that you've done. How closely does that align with the work that we need you to do? Is there a history of success? So whether you were president of the chess club, you volunteered at banquets, and you were the #1 dishwasher from the banquets, do you show a history of excelling? So it can be anything from, back in high school, your first job, to what are you doing volunteering for the PTO, to what are you doing in your last job. So we also look for history of success in addition to the job skills matching. That's how somebody will rise to the top, where we would then say, okay, let's do a phone screen to learn more about them. There are accomplishments hidden everywhere and little accolades that don't always show up in an Employee of the Month certificate that you've gotten. It could show up all over in terms of the way that you could just contribute to community organizations that you've been a part of, your entire life.
How many interviews would you have before you actually hire someone?
Okay, so just because we just did this, so we have an intern program, and we had 1,000 intern resumes, and we interviewed, I want to say, 55 interns, and we made 15 job offers.
Wow. How many the 15 job offers, how many interviews did they have before they got the job?
So they all did a phone interview, and then they all interviewed with the hiring manager either once or twice, depending on logistics. So a lot of these students are offsite, so we did Skype interviews, so sometimes that was separated into 2 additional Skype interviews.
So that was just the 2, hiring manager and the HR person?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so the phone, there's always an HR person and then 2 non-HR people that they met with.
How about you, Matt? What's your hiring process like?
Sure, I think the process is slightly different depending on the position. We always start with looking at cover letters. If the cover letter is engaging and meets the criteria we're looking for, then we go on to the resume to see if the skills are a match. After that, we do a 15-minute, 20-minute phone interview. All the questions are specialized for the position. If folks make it past the phone interview, we usually like to have an interview, a pool of about maybe 5 people or so for a position of the top candidates. And in the in-person interview, most of them go about 3 hours. We spend a little bit of time on just questions, but we have multiple people on our team engaged in the interview process. We're very big on collaboration, so we set up a lot of collaborative tasks to see how people interact with each other. And I would say it's much more, probably like 75% task-based interviewing. With teachers, they come in and do a demonstration lesson. They have to analyze some data and give us their feedback on those things. With positions like CFOs, we ask them to come in and analyze our budget and give us feedback on what changes they might make, what questions they might have. We were looking for how detail-oriented they were and their knowledge of financial statements. So I think it depends on how it is. And then after that, we'll typically go into references with our top couple candidates and just make sure that we've talked with people who've worked with them, and the person that we saw in the interview process is the person that people have worked with in the past.
Will you read a resume without a cover letter?
I will not read a resume without a cover letter.
Ursula, what about your hiring process?
So the process is very similar. It's the application, and in the application, you're going to answer some questions. You're going to submit your resume, your cover letter. Depending on how you answer those questions, the computer screens you out. Then somebody will do a phone interview with you. could be anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes. Again, kind of engaging, how are you going to answer the questions, not really what you answer, but how you answer, how you present yourself over the phone. Once you make it through that, there's a panel interview process. That panel interview is comprised of the hiring manager, the HR manager, and then people that are going to be your peers, your colleagues. You have to do a presentation. You get homework for the interview. It's a very, very interesting process. The panel interview really determines how you interact, how you present, your presentation skills, your communication skills, how you do research, and really based on that panel interview process, then you get your final interview with the hiring manager, and you do a meet and greet with your team. You then have the opportunity to kind of interview them. Is this the environment that you want to work in? Are these the folks? Is this the culture that you want to be in for the next 3 to 5 years? Because we're not going to hire somebody that's going to be there for 6 months. Because typically, when we look at somebody, it costs us about $90,000 from start to finish to train somebody. So it's an investment. So when we hire somebody, it's the real deal. We're not going to just go through it lightly. It's an investment of our time as well as our money. So then that whole process takes about 3 weeks. So in the end, if you've kind of gone through that journey with us, we know it's going to be a good fit long term.
Does the team have any say-so?
Absolutely, because everyone's going to pick up something differently. The body language, the mannerisms, the eye contact. Were they asking where the break room is? What kind of computer do I get? I mean, those are okay questions, but is that really the important thing? Are people going to ask, what is your mission? What is your value proposition statement? Those are the kind of questions that we're looking for. What are you going to contribute to the organization? Have you done your research? Because if you really haven't, then we're doing a research project on you. You have to do the same kind of research on us as well.
Did you want to add anything?
I wanted to build on that just a little bit because I give you our intern process. Our full-time process is more like that. But one of the things I wanted to build on is that we also give a written assignment, and it's one of my favorite parts of the whole process because it does 2 things. One, if we ask you to do a written assignment and you're really not sure if you're interested in the job, that's usually when people are like, no, thank you. So it's a great commitment indicator for us. And also part of this written assignment, the second half of it is that we ask you to come up with 15 questions that you want to ask us, and then we answer all of those questions, because we want you doing research on us, and it's a 2-way street. So in terms of homework as a candidate, having really good questions that show that you've read about the organization and that you're invested in what's our product, what's our challenges, versus just how big are you, and where's my computer, and is, those generic questions. Usually by the time you get to like the 15th question, people have to go deeper. So we do that process, and we also do include the team. And in our case, every individual interviews with me and the CEO as the final step.
Okay. Marjorie, I had a question for you. Is casual dress ever acceptable?
I won't say it's never acceptable, but if you're interviewing, you want to make sure that you present your very best self. First impressions are made, only 7% is based on what you actually say, and 38% is based on how you say what your message, and 55% is based upon how you look. Now that's not just what you're wearing, it also is your posture, it's your facial expressions, it's your eye contact. But I would say when you're going to an interview situation, you can determine what the company's dress code is. Perhaps it's business casual. I would say you would dress above that.
Okay. Ursula, what would you say about the casual dress in an interview? Is it ever acceptable?
It really isn't. Because, it's the best of the best. Just kind of like I said before, if we're making that big investment for you, in you, you really need to come in, dressed to the nines. And not to say that you have to go to Nordstrom's and buy a $1,000 suit. If you don't have a suit, we all know that there's, a lot of consignment stores out there. You can get a great jacket for a couple bucks, and no one is going to know that's where you bought it. But to say, I don't have a suit, I don't have nice shoes, I only have gym shoes. How are you going to make the investment when you start work? You have to come to work, just like everyone else, dressed appropriately. Now, if you go on the interview and you get dressed to the nines and then you get the job, and then you start saying to yourself, now I need to go out and get some suits. I need to get some clothes. There's a ton of places that you can do, some research and get some resources. We all have a $400 phone. You made the choice to buy that. Now you just need to make a choice to really invest in yourself and how you present yourself. Because we all have $100 to pay for that phone every month. So maybe just take a deep look and ask yourself, what's the priority? And if you can do both, that's great. And not to say no phone or a new pair of shoes, but I think you know where this is going.
How about you, Amy?
So no, it's not, casual's not okay in our interview process. We are business casual. The only reason I say it's not okay is because of this concept of putting your best foot forward. I got some advice earlier in my career that I was really, really mad about. So the VP of HR said to me, I think exactly this way, "You dress so young." I'm like, I am young. She doesn't know what she's talking about. So then when I stopped being so young and mad, I was like, oh, what do you mean? And she gave me the standard, dress for the job that you want, not the job that you're in. And we were a manufacturing company, and she said, you look so comfortable. You don't look so hungry for that next role. And so, so once I took it as a productive comment, I was like, okay, so I have to decide what I want my next job to be, and how can I just tweak the way that I'm dressing so that I'm sending the message, I want something different.
Okay. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, same as everyone else here. It's not acceptable for us. We look at it as every adult in our building is a role model for our kids, and we want to make sure that that our kids have professional role models who know how to dress, because they're going to teach our students how to dress for the interview later on. And so, we know that you're not going to wear your interview clothes to work every day, but it sends a signal if to us, what you wear to the interview, if that's your best self, what are you going to wear the rest of the days of the week? And we want to make sure that, our kids, have, like I said, great professional role models.
Okay. Amy, if I would call HR, I was coming in for an interview and said, what's the dress, how should I dress? Would they answer that question?
We would say that we are business casual. So we would say we are business casual.
Okay.
If they were asking about our dress code, we would not say how to dress, because then that shows judgment on their part.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Ursula, what personal qualities and talents do you look for in a candidate? Personal qualities and candidates.
They have to have a great smile, because what is a smile? It's contagious. So if somebody's got a bad day, you can never show it. You always have to have that smile all the time. Because if you're coming into work with a bad attitude, if you're coming into an interview with a bad attitude, what is that saying to your employer? I'm always upset. And what is that going to do when you start speaking to clients, to customers, to your coworkers? That piece is contagious as well, and no one's going to want to work with you. So great attitude, willing to do whatever it takes, and that doesn't mean working 15 hours a day, but if you're in the middle of something and your boss is going to ask you, could you do this for me? Yes. Not, I'll get to it when I can, because they're asking you, you need to do it right then and there. So kind of the same thing goes with the interview. When the hiring manager, the recruiter is going to call and say, I have an opening tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Can you meet me at 10 o'clock? Sure, no problem. And you make it work. Because you know what? If that's what they gave you, that's what they have. And they're going to give you enough time to get ready, get prepared. But really, you need to be flexible with that process as well.
Margie, what would you recommend a client in terms of personal characteristics that would be important to the hiring manager or anyone in the hiring process?
I think something that's probably critical in interviews and any type of communication is to be an active listener. So a lot of times when we're in these situations, interviews are stressful. You spend a lot of time worrying about what you're going to say, and maybe even asking questions, thinking about the next question you're going to ask. It's important to take the time to really actively listen to what's being said, because that's how you can truly establish a rapport and an understanding with the person that you're talking about. And to actively listen, you really need to make eye contact, and you need to hear the answers. So if you ask a question, this has nothing to do with a job interview, but say you ask, are you into hockey, right? The hockey playoffs are. And the person you're speaking with says, no, I'm not that interested in hockey, but my grandson is interested in hockey. Well, if you're listening actively, then you've found out that what is this person interested in? Not hockey, but her grandson. So you need to be relaxed and attentive enough in the interview to really digest the information that you're being given, because if you can do that in an interview, and you will really move things forward.
Okay, Amy.
Okay. So one way I'd like to frame it is consistency. So we look for consistency. And what I mean by that is when you are actually in the interview seat across from the interviewer, and we're asking you questions and you're answering, hopefully with your best self, with your positive energy, telling us the truth about, who you are and what you've accomplished. That's fantastic. But when I say consistency, some of the most meaningful feedback that we've gotten through the interview process has come through my team, through the HR coordinator who schedules the interview, and through our front desk coordinator who helps people get in the building. So our HR coordinator, the joke is she has like a 95% hit rate on that person's gonna get the job, that person's not gonna get the job, simply by how kind is that person when they're interviewing back and forth? Are they showing her respect, or are they only showing the hiring manager respect? Are they being attentive to details and all of those things? Another thing, the front desk coordinator, people have to come in through a gate. So if people are like, what am I supposed to be doing? Patience, they're showing her lack of patience. And then in the interview, they're like, hi, everything's fine. So consistency matters. And it's just come up over time that all of these things, they have an impact. So first you just need to be true to yourself. So if you're an impatient person, don't fake it in the interview, because you're gonna run into challenges later and you may get hired for impatience. So you shouldn't choose a job that pushes your buttons every 5 minutes. Choose another job that maybe doesn't push your buttons, because then you have a higher likelihood for success in that role. But just be really aware that consistency matters, and that there's a lot of different touch points, and this just came out by accident. We weren't like, hey, how did the interview scheduling go? It was just over time that we started to realize that people that weren't inconsistent or weren't consistent in how they were treating people, it came out in the interview process and we didn't hire them.
Thank you. Matt, I realize Matt's got to leave here right after he answers this question, so we'll ask you to answer. What are the personal characteristics you look for in a teacher?
Sure. High expectations, unyielding resolve, ability to problem solve, and then the fourth thing is someone who seeks feedback. We don't want someone who's passive and just takes feedback. We want someone who is actively seeking feedback to get better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your help there today, but Matt has to leave us. He has another appointment. Thank you very much. Okay. Amy, what's your favorite interview question? What response are you looking for?
I'm always looking for the truth and honesty. I'm going to say that 100 times over. But I do want to focus 1 minute on that. So you want to put your best self forward, and you want to take all of these, tips that we're giving you, tips that you get from other people, so that you can reveal your best self in an interview. What we don't want you to do is put together or put forward something that's not your true self. Because in 6 months, you will know you'll be miserable, or you'll quit, or your boss will figure it out, and potentially you'll be terminated. So you don't want to ever misrepresent yourself. It's all about helping your best self come through. So the person with lack of patience perhaps should be in a job where urgency is really important and it's really fast paced, so that they're moving. So I just want to say that's my first answer. So I always want to hear the truth. So some of my favorite questions, I love asking about people's first jobs and what they liked and what they didn't like, what their challenges were, and what they learned. Because if we had time, I'd have you talk to the person next to you and say, tell me about one of your first 2 jobs, and just walk me through that process. And it's amazing how during your first job, your core self is revealed about what you like to do, what you don't like to do, what frustrates you, your communication style, your conflict management style. And anyone that doesn't believe me, I've done this afterwards where I've gone through and peeled apart their first job, and then we talked about their current job, and they're like, oh my gosh, that is me. So I love that question, and it's a lot of fun because people think it doesn't matter. I'm like, no, it matters a lot. I want to talk 20 minutes about you being a camp counselor, and I want to talk to you about your paper route. No, I want to talk to you about that paper route. And then my other favorite question is, how are you most misunderstood? And the reason that's my favorite question is because it's really important that we are hiring people that are continuously learning and growing, and that people know who they are. So we really want people to show up as their true self and their best self. So I want to know how you're most misunderstood, because that tells me, are you self-aware? And can you tell me a story about things that you've done to become more self-aware, how you've grown, and what you've learned from the misunderstandings you've had in the past?
Question for you.
Yes.
If someone is answering a question like they think you want to hear the answer, don't you notice that? Doesn't that become very apparent?
It becomes very obvious because your speech pattern changes. When you're talking about something that's really true to you, you tend to talk faster, you tend to get really excited, and then you're like, and then on that paper route, there was a house on the corner, and they always tipped me really well. So then I would go there first because I realized to make more money, you do that. Okay, this kid knows how to prioritize. Versus, I treated all of my customers equally, and I would drop them off every 3 minutes. I'm like, yeah, you don't even remember how long it took you to drop off your papers. So you do need to know that your speech pattern changes and the authenticity changes. So there's a lot of different ways to be able to tell.
Okay. Margie, you want to comment on that?
I'm just really glad that you asked those questions, Amy, instead of asking, what are your weaknesses? Because those were the questions that, we used to get back in the day that you could only answer in a false way.
Oh.
I'm just so hard on myself when I just work too hard. Those are
me too.
Ursula.
So I asked 2 questions. I'll say, do you remember your favorite boss? And people will say, yeah, I do. So if I called your favorite boss, how would they describe you in 3 words? People take a minute, they collect their thoughts, and they'll give me those 3 words. People that really know themselves, they'll give me those 3 words right away. And that will really tell me how they feel about themselves, how probably that best favorite boss really did feel about that person, and really how they're going to be a contributor in our organization.
Thank you.
Jim, may I make a comment? Well, I mean, what I'm hearing both Ursula and Amy say is that it's really important for everyone to do the work to know who they are and what they want out of their career.
Yeah, I would say that the #1 homework assignment before going on any interview is this process of knowing yourself. Because then it puts you in a very natural position to represent your best self. So there are a lot of activities like this I love this 3-word. I have a bunch of 3-word questions too that you could do right after this. You could say, what are the 3 words my favorite boss would say about me? What are the 3 words my least favorite boss would say about me? What are the 3 words my mom would say about me? What are the 3 words my sister would say about me? What are the 3 words my coworker would say about me? And you will see a trend. And your strengths will start to emerge. Perhaps your biggest opportunities will emerge too. But it's a really great exercise so that you're not putting, something else forward, and then you can leverage those points and come up with your best stories and examples of results to share.
And if you have great stories about and examples of results to share, I would advise you, I don't know if these hiring managers would advise you, I would advise you to practice them. Sometimes we have great stories and we can't communicate them because we feel under pressure in the moment, but if you know you have something amazing that you've done, I don't think it's a bad idea going into an interview to say that out loud in a mirror so you feel comfortable sharing that when you're in kind of a pressure interview situation.
I absolutely think preparation is absolutely okay, as long as you don't lie to me.
I missed
Period. But I think preparation shows that you took time to think about your examples, and then as long as you're answering my follow-up questions, you know, and you're not getting freaked out if you go off script, if you over-practice.
And we have notes up here.
Yes, there's nothing wrong with being prepared. It says we cared. It says we cared enough to think about this before being here.
Well, now, Amy, you're on a roll, so tell us what your biggest turnoff is in an interviewing a candidate.
So I asked all my recruiters this too, and so the number one vote from the team was ego. So if someone walks into the room with something to prove versus something to gain, and what I mean by something to gain is we want a candidate to walk in the room to gain a mutual understanding, this mutual aspect of relationships, and they're here to learn about us, and we're here to learn about them. So if someone shows up with an ego that often shows up in lack of listening, so I was trying to drill down, I was like, well, what makes you think that someone has an ego? And lack of listening was the thing that they demonstrated most. The second turnoff is being too casual. So don't go like this in the interview chair, no matter how comfortable I make you feel, because I'd like to think I'm a nice person, but I'm not slouching in my seat, you know, saying inappropriate things. So don't do it, because we're going to be really concerned about your professionalism going forward. And then the third thing is the not being prepared. If it's on our website, please only ask me a question that shows you read the website and you'd like for me to elaborate. If you ask me a question that is that easily accessible, it tells us that you didn't want to take the time, or you chose not to take the time to be prepared for whatever reason, but we want people that are going to be prepared. So those are 3 turnoffs.
Okay. Wish we had more time. Ursula, what about you?
Big turnoff would be to not be present in the moment. You're doing an interview on the phone. Oh, could you hold on? I have another call. No, I can't hold on.
Oh my God.
You have to be present with me right now. When you do the face-to-face, the phone goes off. You're looking at your watch. Do you have somewhere else to be? Then maybe we can cut this interview short. So really, again, be present in the moment with the people that you're speaking to on the phone, face-to-face, because you only got one shot and you have to make it great.
And another way of looking at it too about the be present is we both want to maximize our time together. And it's not just about appreciating her time, but it's also respecting your own time. How can we get the most out of this time and be present and engaged so that we can both figure out if this is something that's going to work or not?
Okay. Amy, do you ask behavioral questions?
Yes. Everything that we ask is share with us how you have done this, an example of when you have done this, and not hypothetical questions.
Now, if you ask a behavioral question, what do you expect in return?
I expect that you listened to my question and that you answered the question that I asked you. There's a little trick, you know, when we do interview training, is that if someone doesn't answer your question, you put your pen down. And you don't take notes on something that's not answering your question. We also don't take notes on things that say, well, if that happened, I would be really nice. No, tell me about a time when you actually had to deal with a difficult customer. What did you do? And if they struggle, be like, well, okay, a difficult cashier at the store, a difficult customer service rep on the line. Like, it doesn't have to be work, like, just tell me a time when you actually dealt with something difficult, and then you pick up your pen, and you can only write things that they did, things that they said, and things that are real versus storytelling.
If you give them a second chance, if they don't answer it with a specific incident, do you follow up and ask them?
Well, so the goal of the interviewer is to try to pull out information. So we will try to pull out information, but if it takes us the whole interview to get there, the first piece of feedback is they're not a good listener or they're not a very clear communicator. Okay. So that's the conclusion. If somebody doesn't provide, you know, evidence of this is what I did, this is what I said, this is what I did, this is how I did it, then you're sending a message that you're not listening to the question or you don't know how to clearly communicate your accomplishments, where they're going to be a challenge in the role going forward.
Right. How about you, Ursula? Do you ask behavioral questions?
Absolutely. So to go back to the tell me of a time where you took care of a difficult customer, if you are delivering an answer that maybe is not as complete as the recruiter is looking for, they might say, is there anything else you can think of? Do you have any other thoughts? That's your second chance to say, I need to give them something else. Don't say, that's it, because if they're asking you for something else, they're looking for something else. So take that opportunity to provide them with a follow-up answer to that follow-up question.
Okay, thank you. Sticking with you, Ursula, thinking back on your most successful hires, what was the most common attribute among candidates that you hired?
They walked up to every single person, shook their hand in the beginning, and then in the end, shook everybody's hand, thanking them for their time, and they went back and wrote a thank you note to every single person that they dealt with in the interview process. Okay. People think that that's a dying art, and it may be, and it's very easy to send a quick email, and that's fine, but how are you going to make sure that you really stand out from all the other candidates? If there's 10 candidates, 10 interviews, and you all answered correctly, and you were the only one that really went above and beyond with what you were going to do with that delivery of that note, you're really going to make an impression with that recruiter, and probably that recruiter is going to say, if they took such care and concern with us, they're really going to deliver the same way to our customers and to our colleagues.
If you don't get a thank you note, does that put them out of the running?
I would have to get a thank you note at least through email, but if somebody doesn't even thank me for my time,
okay,
probably they're really not committed to the process.
Okay. Marjorie, you want to comment on that?
Even though we're talking about an extensive interview process where the goal of the interviewers is to get as much information about your skills as possible, there's been a study that was conducted by Harvard and some other universities that said actually your job success, 85% of it is based on your interpersonal skills and 15% is based on your technical knowledge. Now, that might be different if you're a surgeon. I would imagine you need to have good surgical skills if you're a surgeon, or a nurse, for example. But a lot of what makes an impression about who you are and the job that you will do is your interpersonal skills in the interview. So I would just emphasize that. How important it is to make a good impression, you know, from the security guard when you walk in all the way throughout.
How about you, Amy?
Which part do you want me to take?
Okay, this, most common attributes among the most successful clients you
okay,
hired.
Sorry. I didn't know if you wanted me to take it.
You were thinking of something else.
Yeah. So if I think over time, the most successful hires, I think that the most successful hires throughout the interview process, if I were to make the relationship between the two, they were able to show both their passion for the position, they were able to demonstrate their technical competence, and they were able to show their true commitment for the role that we had open versus just any role. And they were able to do this in a very consistent manner by showing up as themselves and putting their best selves forward through paying attention to all the details, you know, that they mentioned throughout the whole process. So if I think about the most successful hires, none of them, when I think back, had a bad interview experience. Now, there are some people that the interview experience doesn't go as rough or goes a little rough and then they shine, you know, through the years. That's more likely, but I can't think of the most successful ones that ever had a bad interview experience.
Okay. When in the hiring process do you folks mention compensation?
So in the phone screen.
In the phone screen?
In the phone screen, because we don't want to waste anyone's time. And we don't want them to waste our time.
What do you expect from the phone screen? Do you expect an exact figure or a range? Is it a range acceptable?
A range is totally acceptable.
Okay. How about you, Ursula? When is it discussed?
So in the application process, it'll say salary range expected, and you indicate what that salary range is expected. When we start the conversation, we're not hiring you just for compensation. We give you a total package. So take, for example, benefits. Some people have a $250 deductible. Some people have a $5,000 deductible. So if you get the salary range that you're getting, but your benefits package gives you a $5,000 deductible, you're just out $5,000 of that great compensation package that you just asked for. Vacation, sick time, time off, PTO. You need to make sure that you look at all those pieces. Are you going to be able to work from home? So you're going to be able to save money on commuting. So it's not just about getting $25 an hour. What are you going to really get totally from that employer? And if you look at everything, and everybody's doing it now, they call it a total rewards package, from your compensation to your benefits. Do you have tuition reimbursement? If you go to an employer and they say you get 50% back on your tuition, you need to take that job, because we all know how much the tuition costs, right? Mm-hmm. So it's those kind of things that you need to take into consideration without just saying, I need to make X amount of dollars. Because the money will come, but you have to make sure that it's going to be a good environment with all those other benefits. So money is not the first thing, and it really shouldn't be the last thing that you speak of.
Okay. If the candidates do their research online, like Glassdoor and Salary.com, how close are they going to come to your ranges?
If they go on Glassdoor, they'll probably not only know the range, they'll probably know the questions that are asked in the interview process. You'd be surprised what people post these days.
Yeah, so my only concern with that is that, you know, someone can have the title of customer service rep, and that person could have 15 years of experience, and you might only have 2 years of experience. So I tell people that there's a lot of other factors that go into those sites. It all depends on who's filling out the information. So again, the total compensation discussion, what's the value proposition, what's the match, what else are you looking for in a role? Because we're not going to pay anything that's out of market, and we're not going to not pay people very well for the work that they do. So we want to pay people well, we do our benchmarking, and so what they want matters a little less than what is the job valued in the market, plus our overall benefit package.
Do you ever interview other companies, similar companies to you, to get their salary report?
We pay for surveys that include
okay.
that, yeah.
Okay. You know, we've discussed resumes, we've discussed interviewing, we've discussed hiring. I'm wondering if any one of you got a question in those areas that we haven't asked that you'd like to ask now. Are we that good? Oh, here's a question.
I got a question, and Andy, you mentioned this, and I see that you're all, I'm not sure about Ursula, but you look all ready for this. With regard to notes, you're having notes in an interview. If you're interviewing several companies, you know, in the research you've done, you can, in the nervous situation of an interview, sometimes you get these facts and figures mixed up or confused. So, you know, I've read that it's inappropriate to have notes at the interview.
Let me just repeat.
To say, you know, when I look at my notes, I have some notes on that topic. So I have not done that, but I just wanted to hear what you had to say about notes.
The question was, and I know you folks have heard it, but is it appropriate to bring notes, is that assumption, into an interview of the research the person has done? Do you feel that appropriate or inappropriate?
I think that the answer to this question is going to be very dependent on who's sitting on the other side of the desk. I think it's going to be their personal preferences, their personal experience, and their company's experience. From my perspective, I would rather you show up with your notes, feel comfortable pulling them out to reference it, because it shows me that you're comfortable, you're admitting that, you know, there's something that you know you want to touch more on, and you may want to show it to me and elaborate on it. One suggestion I have is make sure that your notes also put your best foot forward. So know if you're sitting that close, we're all trained to read upside down, especially if you're interviewing for a sales job. That's all they do is read upside down. So make sure that whatever's on your paper doesn't have the competitor's interview notes on it, that you take some time to type them out or do it in such a way that this is also representing your best self, because I might actually ask you, oh, what do you have written down there? And then you're going to be like, oh, so you'll open yourself up to further inquiry potentially. So be aware of that.
Ursula, how about you?
It's perfectly fine for you to come in with a legal pad that's in a folder, in a holder, take some notes, have some questions, but you really shouldn't have 4 different employers' information on that legal pad. You're interviewing with me, have my information on there. Don't have everyone's information, because what's going to happen? You're going to look at the wrong company, you're going to give me the wrong answer, and then I'm going to know that you really didn't do the right research on me and my company.
Okay.
I would get a portfolio. I would make your notes look super professional. You might be taking notes. Is that not okay? You might be taking notes also, but you probably don't want to refer to notes that are as much about your experience or questions that are relating to you personally. You wouldn't want to say, let me look at my notes. What was I doing in 1995? You should know that information, but I would say notes that are questions that you want to ask in the interview would be mostly appropriate.
Amy, is it ever acceptable for the interviewee to take notes? And would you comment on that?
Yeah, again, in our situation, because we like the transparency and we want you to go home and reread your notes and decide if this is an opportunity you're interested in, we're very okay with people taking notes. And again, when I do my interview notes, I write pretty messy, but if someone's looking, I'll say, this is what I wrote down about your answer. Again, because that's a style preference of transparency.
When do you say that? This is what I wrote down?
Yeah, so if someone's trying to see what I wrote, I was like, you see, I'm just writing the 3 bullet points for the answer you just gave me. You know, because I don't want them to be nervous, and it's an interview, so I'm writing down what they're saying. But that's, again, our style, our approach, so I wouldn't say that all companies are that way.
Well, you, Ursula, is it okay to take notes?
Absolutely, it's okay to take notes, and you can cheat, if you will, on a phone interview because no one sees what you have in front of you. So it's okay to have your resume, some pages printed out of that company website. All the notes that you just mentioned would be right in front of you so that you can reference that. Obviously, you don't want to make a lot of noise so that the recruiter hears that you're going through 40 different pages, but it's okay to have those notes in front of you. And really, if you're taking notes during the interview, that's really just showing a lot of care and concern with that person on the other side of you.
Yeah, I just want to add something. So even if you don't have notes or you want to bring any notes in, I'm just remembering a hiring manager comment to me several years ago where he came in and he said, I'm not even considering this person for a job because he didn't have a pen and paper.
Oh.
So he showed up already knowing I'm not going to have anything worthy of writing down from this interview, and there's nothing worse than being like, do you have a pen? You don't want to be that person. So it doesn't matter what you're bringing, but at least bring a blank sheet of paper and a pen.
Amy, Emily Post says, the latest edition of her book, that the proper thank you note is to send an email thanking the person and then end it by saying note to follow, which means you will then send a handwritten thank you note. What are your comments on that statement?
We appreciate thank you notes in terms of closing the whole interaction. It doesn't matter to me if it's email or if it's handwritten. However, it must be timely. It just must be timely. So with email these days, within 24 hours, it will show that that's that important. Don't send me a handwritten note that shows up 2 to 3 weeks later. The mail's pretty fast, so if you choose to do it handwritten, make sure it's showing up in a couple days. Emails, I think, are perfectly acceptable, and I don't necessarily need both, but it shows closure. And also, we're not looking for the hard sell in your thank you note. If it's thank you for your time, I'm interested, just be really clear about what you're going to say. Or if you need to follow up, say you had asked me about XYZ, there's just one more thing I wanted to tell you, but don't make it too much of a sell unless you're following up on a specific question that was sort of left open-ended.
Okay, what about sending it from their iPad in the parking lot?
I have to be open-minded to the speed of communication these days. I haven't gotten one yet.
Okay. Ursula, how about you?
I really don't think it's necessary for you to send that email as you're getting in the car, getting on the bus, getting on the train, because then you could come across as being a little desperate. You know, I really enjoyed speaking with you today. I look forward to speaking with you soon. You know, you don't really need to deliver that, you know, within the hour, but you do need to do it within 24 hours.
Okay.
If you wait much longer, then that impression isn't going to be fresh in that recruiter's mind.
But if in doubt, if you do forget, you should send it anyway. I mean, I know you want it right away, but it
How
doesn't.
could you forget? You just spent an hour
I
of
know.
your time. There's no reason to forget.
Correct. Margie, you got any comments on thank you notes?
If you can't have someone proofread your thank you note, read it aloud. Read it aloud before you send it.
Yeah.
That's the last thing that they're going to hear from you before you, before perhaps they decide if you're going on to the next step or if they're going to extend you an offer. And so I would say just make sure there's no mistakes. I've seen so many small typos in emails. Read it aloud if you can't get someone to proof it for you.
Ursula, what about a timeline? I'm sorry, you have a question? Yes. Go ahead.
My question is, Amy, I know you mentioned asking candidates about their first jobs, but my question to each of you is, how far back do you recommend that you go on your resume? Some of us have been in the workforce for 25 years.
Okay.
I've heard folks say that don't go past 10 years, 15. My question is, consider your whole career, put it all on your resume if it's 20, 25 years.
The question is, how far back should you go on your resume in terms of your experience?
So we're going to get there. If you and I meet and talk, I'm going to know about all of those jobs by the end of our interview because that's our process. But if I think more globally about lots of employers, I like to see the whole story, but that doesn't mean it has to be every job. You know, some people I've seen do a 10-year span and say, you know, I keep going back to customer service because these various customer service roles at a variety of consumer product companies, or if there's any way to group them together. On your LinkedIn profile, which we haven't talked about, so when we talk about resumes, LinkedIn is how people can find you. There, most people only go back 10 years, or however far back it's relevant to whatever job you're applying for. So for example, I worked in childcare for 7 years. I don't put that on my resume because it's not relevant to the human resources jobs that I'm doing now. But so sometimes I put it in my notes, you know, interests, you know, child development teacher for 7 years. Somehow I get it out there, but I don't put it in my timeline or my history. So LinkedIn, I think 10 years is totally acceptable, but go back 15 if those years are relevant to the job you're looking for. And then grouping, I think, is fine as long as you do it in a logical way that helps tell your story.
I would just say, yes, include the work if it's relevant, but you're going to give a lot more detail about what you've been doing more recently and less detail about the jobs that you did 20 years ago, perhaps.
Ursula, how far back?
Yeah, just the title, for example. You don't need to go into all your accomplishments in that job you had 20 years ago, just what it was.
Unless that job that you had 25 years ago provided you with an award, a special position, a promotion, you probably don't need to go that far back. If it was the last 3 jobs and that equated to 15 years of experience, 2 pages of a resume, that's great, because much more than 2 pages of a resume, it's just not going to be read. So
good point.
It's not really the best use of your time or the recruiter's time to include every single thing that you've done. Though it is very important, great accomplishments, it probably won't be relevant to the job that you're applying for.
We have a question over here with this lady.
My question has to do with part of what you just mentioned. For a person who is transitioning from support to management, how do you convey or unify the resume so that you seem qualified, so that you appear more qualified for the higher position?
Did you manage a project? Did you manage people? Did you manage a budget? You managed something, you just didn't provide support. So if you're able to kind of customize the things that you did in that job as a support person to show how you managed that process, I think that would be really relevant to that recruiter.
Let me repeat the question for the people that aren't here. The question was, how do you justify the fact you're going from support to management, correct? Correct. On your resume?
Yes.
Okay. Amy, you want to comment on that?
I agree with everything that she just said, and it's about the verbs that you use. You know, led group discussions. That in a support role, you know, so you could have led things. You use the management words. Again, it's about telling the truth between what the job description is and what evidence do you have in your history. So the verbs that you use to describe your most recent support role, you want to use the verbs that most align with managing and leading others. And it's all about that word choice that helps with the match. And you can find things managing a budget, using the word managing a budget versus track a budget. Track a budget is a support word. Manage a budget is a manager word, assuming it's all true. Again, you know, that you're just always telling the truth, but choosing the verbs that align to the job that you want to have.
I would just say that this process, when you're bringing your best self to the interview, you have to do that homework of finding your best self beforehand and letting your resume reflect your best self. You've probably managed a lot of things, and you'll have to kind of go back and find your best self in your past experience and let that be reflected on your resume.
We've all trained people in our lifetime, and you're not as a manager, you do that. As a support person, you train that new person that's sitting next to you. That shows, you know, great competencies as a manager. So those are the exact things that you can add to that job description.
I know there's a couple people got questions, but we got to honor the time for these people. So if you got a question, why don't you come up and ask these people individually, if they're okay, if you don't have to run out the door. But we said we'd cut it off at 7 o'clock, and I'm getting the high sign over here from Kimberly. So I want to thank our panel for their help in this very important subject.
I just want to thank all of you again for coming this evening, and I just want to extend just a little bit of appreciation for our panel's presenters this evening. You know, these guys have been working, we've all been working on this now for several months together, and they've put a lot of time in preparing for this evening to be here and talking with you guys tonight. So I just want to really say, you know, they all have professional jobs, they've all got lives outside of what they do in their professional jobs, and they've really given a lot of time and energy to what they've done tonight. So, am I too loud? I'm always too loud. Anyway, so I just really want you guys to know how much we all appreciate everything that you've done tonight. So let's give them another big hand, please. And let's also thank Jim. He did a wonderful job. He also put in tons of work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to just have a little kind of housekeeping note here. If you guys came in and did not register for the event in advance, or if you did not, you know, if you just came in and did not pick up your name tag or anything, please make sure that you give us your email address so we can keep in touch with you, because we're going to have a raffle that we're going to perform for everybody who was here by picking names out of a hat for everybody who was here, and you'll find out if you won the raffle by email. So you want to make sure that you are able to keep in touch with us. And then just a final note, you can find my contact information how many of you guys are alumni of National Louis? Yeah, great. So you guys all make sure you visit the National Louis website, hit the alumni tab. My name and contact information is all over it. You guys can get in touch with me anytime. It is my pleasure to put you in touch with career development or any of the other resources here at NLU. Make sure you check out for our monthly newsletter, for our events that come up. We've got a Common Core seminar coming up. We've got a reunion coming up for National College of Education, and we're working on all kinds of stuff already for the summer and fall. So please stay in touch with us on that. And once again, thank you to everybody for tonight, and you guys have a great one.